65 tons of German steel against 11 tons of Soviet tin. 200 millimeters of frontal armor against an open fighting compartment flooding with freezing rain. It would seem the outcome of this duel was automatically foreordained. The crew of the Su-76 self-propelled gun, which soldiers grimly called a mass grave for four, was trapped. Blinded, deafened, cursed by their own infantry, they faced a choice: die as targets or take a shot that defied all laws of ballistics. Watch to the end to understand what goes on in a man's mind when he aims into the void to hit the enemy's heart. We will tell you why a Yakut hunter decided to tape a stranger's binoculars to a cannon barrel and how instinctive shooting outplayed the German computers of that era. This is the story of how a single act of insane risk turned an inevitable execution into a legend. June 23, 1944. Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic, Polisia. Operation Bagration looks like sweeping red arrows slicing through the Wehrmacht map in the Soviet Information Bureau reports. But here, on the ground, geopolitics means nothing. Here, there is only mud. Sticky, heavy, all-pervading substance that clogs tire treads, jams breaches, and sucks the heat out of a human body faster than an Arctic wind. War in the swamps is not about maneuvers or tactics. It is an exhausting struggle against physics, where the coefficient of friction and the surface tension of the quagmire kill just as effectively as lead. The humidity is 100%. It isn't raining. A cold mist hangs in the air, settling on rags, metal, and skin. Water gurgles in lungs. Breathing is hard. Every movement requires an effort of will. An infantry battalion, attached as reinforcement for a tank breakthrough, lies on the corduroy road. The corduroy road, logs laid across the path, is the only artery of life in this kingdom of rotten water. 2.5 meters wide. The logs are slippery, as if soaped. To the left is a bog stretching into the abyss. To the right, the same black, bubbling sludge. Step one pace to the side, and you sink up to your throat, and no one will offer a hand because the rescuer would be pulled in too. This is a corridor, and this corridor is under fire. Ahead, on a dry, sandy patch rising above the swamp like an island, a German is dug in. Reconnaissance reported vaguely, heavy armor, but the sound of the shot cannot be confused with anything else. It is a dry, sharp crack that bursts capillaries in the nose. 88 millimeters, a caliber that became a death sentence for thousands of crews from Africa to the Volga. There, in the fog, stands a Ferdinand self-propelled gun. 65 tons of gloomy German genius. Frontal armor of 200 millimeters. For our field artillery, it is an indestructible monolith. For the infantry on the log road, it is a hammer methodically driving nails into a coffin lid. The distance is 1,500 meters. For German Zeiss optics, this is not a distance. It is a shooting gallery. The Ferdinand's gunner works calmly, without fuss. He has no reason to be nervous. He knows he is completely safe. His sector of fire covers the only road. The Russians cannot turn around. The trucks would slide into the swamp. They cannot attack head-on. That is suicide. They are trapped. This is not a battle. This is an execution. The shell flies faster than sound. First, you see the lead vehicle explode, and only a fraction of a second later does the roar of the shot reach your ears. The monstrous kinetic energy of the solid shot turns the Gaz AA truck into a cloud of splinters and burning gasoline. The shockwave blows people off the log decking straight into the quagmire. The water turns brown. The screams of the wounded drown in the hissing of hot metal falling into the cold sludge. "Get down! Air raid!" Someone screams out of inertia, though there is no aircraft. The sky is covered with leaden clouds. Low cloud cover presses the smoke to the ground. Another shell passes through the bed of the next truck like a red-hot needle through butter. The shell does not detonate immediately. It punches through the engine, the cab, the driver, and explodes only after hitting the logs of the road. A fountain of wood chips and mud rises 10 meters high. The logistics of the offensive are destroyed in 4 minutes. The column has stopped. The rear vehicles try to back up, wheels spinning, tearing bark from the logs. Engines roar at the limit, spewing blue smoke, but there is no traction. Chaos. The German gunner changes targets. Now he is hitting the manpower. High explosive fragmentation. The fuse is set for instant action. The shell touches an alder branch above the heads of the infantry and bursts in the air. This is called an airburst. A deadly hail of shrapnel covers an area of 200 square meters. The shards are chopped, with jagged edges. They do not enter the body neatly like a bullet. They tear flesh, break bones, turn a human into ground meat. Those who fell on the logs try to press themselves into the wet wood, to become flat, to disappear. But there is nowhere to disappear. "Medic! Over here, damn it! Tourniquet on the leg!" a sergeant wheezes, pressing the stump of a young soldier against his dirty tunic. Blood spurts in black jets. Arterial bleeding. The kid has 2 minutes before his brain shuts down from hypoxia. Medics crawl on their bellies, tearing their elbows on knots. Their bags are already empty. Bandages are soaked and covered in mud. Sterility does not exist here. Any wound is almost guaranteed gangrene. The swamp water teems with bacteria that will devour a wounded man in 3 days if he is not evacuated. But there will be no evacuation. The way back is cut off by burning vehicles. The way forward is blocked by a steel monster. The German fires again. The methodical nature of his work evokes hatred mixed with animal terror. The interval between shots is 8 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The clank of the breech. 6, 7. Shot. The flash in the fog is barely visible, but the result is monstrous. Another explosion scatters the bodies of infantrymen like rag dolls. The psychology of the soldier breaks. People begin to fall into a stupor. They just lie there and look at the gray sky, waiting for their turn. The instinct of self-preservation, demanding to run, is suppressed by the realization of the futility of flight. The swamp will not let them go. The battalion commander, a major with a face gray from lack of sleep, screams into the radio until his voice cracks. "Birch, I am Falcon. We are getting slaughtered. Give us fire. Suppress that bitch. Where is the artillery? Where are the gods of war, damn them?" In the ether, there is the crackle of static and the indifferent voice of a staff officer. "Falcon, hold on. We are looking for a solution. Square 34 is closed for aviation. Wait. Wait for what? Until they roll us all into the dirt? I have half a company left." The major throws the handset into the mud. He is powerless. His rifle, his TT pistol, his soldiers' grenades, all of it is useless junk against 200 millimeters of Krupp steel. The distance is 1.5 kilometers. Even if they stood up to their full height and ran into the attack, they would drown before they reached grenade-throwing range. It is a dead end. The trap has snapped shut. The smell on the corduroy road is a mixture of damp burning, sour gunpowder, and the contents of ruptured intestines. This smell eats into the pores. The wind does not carry it away. The heavy, humid air holds the stench right at the ground. On this sector of the front, time has stopped. It seems this slaughter has lasted an eternity, though no more than 20 minutes have passed. 20 minutes of methodical destruction. The German machine works like a conveyor belt of death. The loader feeds the shell. The gunner turns the hand wheels, aligning the triangle of the sight with the next target. The commander gives the order. Shot. The casing falls onto the floor of the fighting compartment with a ring. The fan sucks out the powder gases. Repeat. No rage, no emotions. Just work. For the Ferdinand crew, the Russian soldiers on the road are just targets on a range. Silhouettes. Statistics. They don't even see the faces of those they kill. Optics turn war into a technical ballistics problem. And on our side of the road, amidst burning iron and screaming people, despair is brewing. An answer is needed. Someone is needed who can oppose this cold German mechanics with something equivalent. But there are no heavy tanks, no aviation. The artillery lagged behind at the crossing. There are only light infantry support self-propelled guns. Columbines, as they are called in the rear, or bitches, as the soldiers call them for the cramped fighting compartment and the smell of gasoline. Su-76. Thin armor, open top, gasoline engine that flares up from a single match. A mass grave for 4. One such machine, bypassing burning trucks, slowly crawls onto the edge of the corduroy road. Its tracks squelch in the mud, the engine hums with strain. It looks pitiful against the backdrop of the invisible German giant, small, angular, dirty. The crew inside is wet to the bone, but this is the only chance, the only barrel capable of reaching the enemy. If they get lucky, if they don't burn first, if they are fast enough. War gives no guarantees. It only gives opportunities, the price of which is life. And right now, the price of this opportunity is about to skyrocket. The blow comes out of nowhere. No whistle, no howl, just an instantaneous shift of reality. A shell from a 105mm German howitzer, firing for area effect, enters the viscous ground 3 meters from the left side of the self-propelled gun. The swamp saves the crew from instant death. The thick, heavy mud absorbs 90% of the kinetic energy of the fragments, but the shock wave works according to the laws of hydrodynamics. The sludge transmits the impulse into the bottom of the vehicle, tossing 12 tons of metal like an empty tin can. Inside the fighting compartment, this blow is felt not as sound, but as a physical kick to the entire body simultaneously. The air in the open compartment compresses instantly, knocking the wind out of them. Eardrums cannot withstand the pressure drop. The world turns off the sound. Only a thin, high-pitched ringing remains, drilling into the brain like a dental burr. Sergeant Major Oklopkov falls onto the gun breech, hitting his chest against the steel guard. The pain comes with a delay. The mechanic's instinct kicks in first. Check the integrity of the machine. The Gaz 203 engine, a pair of 2 6-cylinder motors, sneezes, loses rhythm, but continues to pull. The tracks grind, churning the swamp. The machine is alive. The suspension held. The armor, those pitiful 15 millimeters of rolled steel, is not pierced. But something has changed. Something has irreparably broken in the very essence of the self-propelled gun. Oklopkov raises his head. His eyes water from the powder fumes drawn into the compartment by the backdraft. He looks at the gunner's station. The corporal, a young guy from Ryazan, sits on the folding seat, swaying like a pendulum. Thin, dark streams are flowing from both his ears. He is shell-shocked. His gaze is unfocused, hands senselessly groping his knees, trying to find his fallen headset. But something else is more terrifying. There, where a second ago was the Hertz panorama, the eye of the gun, a complex system of prisms and lenses allowing fire from closed positions and direct laying. Now there is a void. A piece of shrapnel, the single one that broke through the mud barrier, sheared off the optical head with surgical precision. Only a jagged stump of the bracket remains, with jagged brass edges sticking out and glass dust falling from it. The Su-76 is the chassis of a T-70 light tank and a ZIS-3 divisional gun, a brilliant hybrid, cheap and angry. But a gun without a sight is just a steel pipe weighing a ton. Without the Hertz panorama, ballistics turns into reading tea leaves. You cannot set the elevation angle. You cannot take the lead. You do not see the grid by which the distance to the target is calculated. A 105mm caliber shell has turned a formidable weapon into a useless pile of metal. The machine is blind. "Sight!" Oklopkov screams, but he cannot hear himself. His voice drowns in the cotton wool of shell shock. He grabs the gunner by the shoulder, shakes him. The guy looks through the commander, his pupils dilated to the limit. Shock. Oklopkov climbs over the breach, fingers palpating the mounting point. No hope. The horizontal aiming mechanism is jammed by a fragment, but that can be fixed with a sledgehammer. But you cannot fix optics with a sledgehammer. Zeiss glass lenses, ground at the factory with micron precision, have turned into dust on the floor of the compartment, mixed with mud and oil. This is a catastrophe. In combat conditions, the loss of optics is equivalent to the loss of the barrel. According to regulations, such a machine is considered non-combat ready and subject to immediate withdrawal to the rear for repairs. But there is no rear. Behind is the corduroy road clogged with burning equipment. Ahead is the Ferdinand, methodically taking apart the infantry. To leave means to abandon their own. To stay means to become a target. The Su-76 isn't called bare-assed Ferdinand or Crew's mass grave for the sake of a witty phrase. The open-topped compartment makes the crew vulnerable to any stray fragment, any mortar mine, even a grenade thrown by a lucky infantryman. There is no thick hide of an IS-2 here, behind which you can wait out the storm. Here, your skin is an oil-soaked tunic. The rain intensifies. Icy water floods the open compartment, runs down the breach, drips onto hands. The cold chills to the bone, but sweat flows down backs in hot streams. This is adrenaline intoxication. The body prepares to die. The trembling in the hands is not fear. It is body chemistry overloaded with cortisol. "Driver, stop!" Oklopkov kicks the driver in the back with his boot. It is the only way to communicate when the intercom is broken and ears are blocked. The machine jerks and freezes. The tracks stop churning the sludge for a moment. The engine shifts to idle. The vibration of the hull becomes fine, trembling. In the ensuing relative silence, the rain can be heard drumming on the steel sheets of the guard. Ding, ding, ding. The sound is like a metronome count. The gunner comes to. He runs his hand over his ear, looks at his bloody fingers. A meaningful expression appears in his eyes. Horror. He understands. He sees the smashed sight. He knows this is the end. Without eyes, they are not warriors. They are targets. He opens his mouth to say something, maybe to ask for an order to retreat, but Oklopkov interrupts him with a harsh gesture. The sergeant major looks at the gun barrel. The long tube with the muzzle brake looks toward the enemy. The barrel looks, but does not see. The distance is 1.5 kilometers. At such a range, an aiming error of 1 millimeter at the muzzle results in a miss of 10 meters at the target. Hitting the Ferdinand without a sight is like threading a needle while sitting on a galloping horse. Impossible. Physics is implacable. Ballistics is an exact science. It does not forgive approximation. The radio in the corner of the compartment comes to life. The reception lamp blinks a red eye. Through the crackle of interference, the distorted voice of the infantry battalion commander breaks through. Ochlopkov does not hear the words, but he feels the intonation. It is hysteria. The infantry demands fire. They don't know the self-propelled gun is blind. They see the cannon and wait for a miracle. They think that right now this barrel will spit fire and save them from the German press. Responsibility weighs on the shoulders heavier than body armor. Ochlopkov runs his palm over the wet metal of the breech. The cold steel takes the heat from his palm. He feels every scratch, every weld seam. The machine is an extension of his body, and now this body is crippled. The feeling of helplessness is replaced by cold, calculating anger. The anger of a hunter whose gun has broken, but the beast is already here, and there is nowhere to retreat. In the taiga, if your sight breaks, you don't abandon the hunt. You crawl closer. But here you cannot crawl. The swamp holds tighter than a trap. A whirlwind of thoughts rushes through the sergeant major's head. Regulations, manuals, firing tables, all this is garbage now. A solution is needed. Unconventional, wild. A solution not written in any instruction of the main Directorate of Armored Forces. Load armor piercing! Ochlopkov wheezes. His voice cracks. His throat is raw from fumes. The gunner looks at him like a madman. Shoot? Where? Into the white light like a penny toss? Load, damn it! Ochlopkov pushes the loader toward the ammo rack. A shell weighing 6 kilograms, 200 grams, lands in the tray. The breech closes with a clang. The sound of metal on metal sounds like a sentence. The gun is loaded. But it is impossible to aim. The sector of fire is narrow. Horizontal aiming on the Su-76 is limited by the design of the compartment, only 15 degrees left and right. To turn more, the whole machine needs to turn. The driver must work the levers with jeweler's precision, driving the multi-ton hulk into the line of sight. But there is no line of sight. There is no reference point. The sergeant major leans out of the compartment. The wind hits his face with icy grit. Ahead, in the breaks of the fog, he sees a flash. The German shoots again. A yellow spot of fire, then black smoke. Ochlopkov spots a landmark, a dry pine tree split by lightning. The German is standing slightly to the right, in the bushes. Visual contact is established. The commander's eyes see the target. The only problem is how to connect the commander's eyes and the axis of the barrel bore. Between them is 1.5 meters of emptiness and armor steel. Hands are shaking, not from fear, from cold and tension. Fingers are numb, obeying poorly. Ochlopkov tries to visualize the flight path of the shell. A straight line, slightly curved by gravity. At direct fire range, up to 800 meters, the trajectory is flat. But to the German, it is 1,500. The shell will go in an arc. The barrel needs to be raised. By how much? By a degree? By 2? Without the panorama, it is impossible to determine. An error in elevation angle of 1/10 of a degree, and the shell will go wide, fly over, or bury itself in the mud in front of the target. War does not forgive the blind. It devours them. The Su-76 right now is a wounded animal. Dangerous, but doomed. If they shoot and miss, the German will spot the flash. The return shot of .88 caliber will leave not even memories of them. Shards of armor mixed with meat, that is what will remain. They have one chance, one shot. No right to make a mistake. Ochlopkov wipes his face with a dirty sleeve. Oil smears across his cheek like war paint. He looks at the broken sight bracket. In his brain, trained by years of hunting in the Yakut taiga, a mad mosaic begins to form. If there is no standard eye, a stranger's eye must be transplanted. "Binoculars!" he screams, drowning out the noise of the rain. "Give me the binoculars! Move!" The loader does not understand. He is in a stupor. Ochlopkov yanks his duffel bag toward himself. There, wrapped in an oily rag, lies a trophy. German officer's binoculars, Carl Zeiss, 6 times magnification, coated optics. A thing he took off a dead spotter near Smolensk. An ideal instrument. Clean, transparent, perfect. Ochlopkov takes it out. The glass shines coldly in the twilight of the overcast day. These binoculars were created to look, not to shoot. They have no aiming grid for a cannon. They have no adjustment mechanism. They are just 2 spotting scopes connected by a hinge. But for Ochlopkov right now, this is not just optics. It is a prosthesis. He puts the binoculars to the gun barrel. Metal slides on metal. It won't hold. Hands are shaking. "Wire," he commands. "Everything we have. Cable, rope, belts, fast!" The crew begins to move. The command, however insane, pulls them out of their stupor. A goal appears. Weird, incomprehensible, but a goal. The driver digs into the spare parts kit, pulls out a coil of baling wire. The loader tears off a piece of telephone cable lying on the floor. Engineering improvisation on the verge of insanity begins. The task: connect the incompatible. Tape fragile German optics to a rough Soviet barrel so that it doesn't fly off from the recoil and looks where the shell looks. This is a violation of all instructions for the operation of weapons. In peacetime, people are court-martialed for damaging entrusted property for this. But right now is not peacetime. Right now is time to die or survive. Ochlopkov looks at the binoculars, then at the barrel, then into the gray mist where the Ferdinand lurks. The duel begins. The blind against the sighted, David with a homemade sling against Goliath in plate armor. The bets are placed. The life of the crew against one shot. The 9R radio installed in the corner of the compartment is no longer a communication device. Now it is a broadcaster of agony. The headphone membrane vibrates from overload, splashing concentrated chaos into Sergeant Major Ochlopkov's ears. There, on the airwaves, there is no regulation, no call signs, no subordination. There is only the animal fear of people being killed and the rage of those who cannot stop it. "Birch! Birch, you bastard! Answer!" The infantry battalion commander's voice breaks into a falsetto. This is no longer an order. It is a plea turning into a curse. "They are slaughtering us! Direct fire! Where is your armor? Where is the suppression?" Every word hits the nerves harder than gun recoil. Ochlopkov sits motionless, gripping the handset until his knuckles turn white. He hears not only the voice. In the background, through the crackle of atmospheric interference and the hiss of discharges, the sound of real battle breaks through. Dull explosions, machine gun chatter, and that terrible, squelching sound of hits into living flesh, which seems to be transmitted even through radio waves. The infantry commander does not see what is happening inside the self-propelled gun. For him, the Su-76 is a steel god of war, obligated to intervene. He sees the silhouette of the machine on the edge of the swamp and does not understand why it is silent. Why its cannon, that long trunk of 76 caliber, looks toward the enemy, but does not spit fire. For the infantry, the silence of artillery is betrayal. "Why are you silent, Birch?" the speaker wheezes. "My left flank is naked. 3rd Company is done. Just shreds. Give me fire. Give me just one shell, you snake. Ochlopkov feels cold sweat running down his back, mixing with rainwater. He wants to answer. He wants to scream that he is blind, that his sight is smeared across the armor, that he is the same helpless piece of meat as the infantry on the log road. But he remains silent. One cannot show weakness on the air. Panic is contagious. If he says the self-propelled gun is non-operational, the infantry will run. And there is nowhere to run. Behind them is the swamp. They will simply be shot in the back like hares. The situation is a stalemate. The physics of war dictates its cruel laws. The distance to the Ferdinand is 1,500 meters. This is an extreme range for a duel, even if they had working optics. The German sees them perfectly. His Zeiss allows him to make out the rivets on the armor of the Soviet self-propelled gun. But the German is not shooting yet. Why? Because the Su-76 stands motionless, blending in with the grey brush and the veil of rain. The engine is idling. The exhaust is pressed to the ground. For the German gunner, it is currently just a suspicious mound of dirt. But as soon as a shot is fired, everything will change. The muzzle flash of the ZIS-3 cannon is a bright tongue of flame 2 meters long, plus a cloud of powder gases, plus dust and mud spray raised by the shockwave. This is 100% unmasking. It is like turning on a spotlight in a dark room and yelling, "I am here!" As soon as they shoot, the German gunner will align the crosshairs with the center of the flash. It will take him 3 seconds, another 1.5 seconds, shell flight. 5 seconds after the first shot, 88 millimeters of steel and explosives will fly into the Su-76 compartment. The open compartment will not save them. 15 millimeters of armor is pierced through and through. The shell will explode inside, turning the crew into biological mince mixed with burning gasoline. Ochlopkov knows this math. He has seen such hits. He knows what the confined space effect is. That is why he has no right to miss. The first shot must be fatal. If he misses, there will be no second chance. Germans do not forgive mistakes. But how to hit? How, damn it, to hit at 1.5 kilometers without a sight, orienting only by the barrel? It is shooting blindly. It is a lottery where 4 lives in the compartment and hundreds of lives on the log road are at stake. "Birch, I am Falcon." The voice in the headphones changes tone. Now it is not a scream, but the heavy, leaden breathing of the doomed. "If you don't hit now, I will get you, bastard from the other world. Do you hear? Have pity on the people." This is a blow to the gut. Responsibility weighs heavier than a caterpillar track. Ochlopkov looks at his guys. The loader, just a kid, is pressed with his back against the ammo rack. He is shaking. He looks at the commander with puppy eyes, full of terror and hope. He hears snatches of phrases from the headphones hanging on the commander's neck. He understands that they are being cursed. The driver is clutching the levers. His face is a mask of mud and soot on which only eyes and teeth show white. He waits for a command. Any command. Forward, back, fire, it doesn't matter. Just to interrupt this unbearable waiting for death. The gunner is still wiping blood from his ear. He looks at the empty sight bracket like an amputated limb. He is a professional. He knows that a cannon without a panorama is just iron. He does not believe in success. Inside the compartment there is silence, broken only by the drumming of rain and the wheezing of the radio. Outside is hell. This contrast tears consciousness apart. Ochlopkov feels like a sniper whose rifle has been taken away, but the target remains. He sees the enemy. He knows where he stands. He feels his presence with his skin. But the instrument of war is broken. This feeling of powerlessness gives birth to a cold, calculating rage inside. Not a hot flash of anger, but a heavy, dark malice. Malice at the designers who made the open compartment. Malice at the supply officers who didn't give a spare sight. Malice at the Germans sitting in warmth and comfort behind thick armor. And malice at himself. Patience, Oklopkov whispers with just his lips. Patience is a way not to croak ahead of time. He understands that the battalion commander is right. The infantry will be slaughtered. If he does not intervene, in 10 minutes the Ferdinand will finish with the trucks and start methodically shooting up the bushes where the self-propelled gun is hiding. The outcome is the same. Death is inevitable in both scenarios. But there is a nuance. One can die as a target, silently and submissively. Or one can die as a hunter, trying to latch onto the beast's throat before the end. The choice is made. Fear is gone. Only the task remains. An engineering, ballistic, impossible task. Oklopkov slowly takes off his headset. Falcon's wheezing recedes, becoming background noise. Now only hands, eyes, and iron matter. He looks at the binoculars taped with wire. It looks pitiful, amateurish, farm-rigged, an engineering solution from the Stone Age. Wire biting into the oil paint of the barrel, rags placed for cushioning. German optics on a Soviet gun. But it is all they have. Listen to the command! Oklopkov's voice sounds dry and hard, like the strike of a bolt. No emotions, only function. We will work from a stationary position. Driver, kill the engine. We need stability. Any vibration will throw off the aim. Comrade Sergeant Major, if we kill it, we might not start up later. Batteries are dead. The driver objects. Kill it, Oklopkov barks. If we miss, we won't need to start up anyway. The engine sneezes and dies. Silence descends instantly, making the sounds of explosions on the log road frighteningly distinct. Now the self-propelled gun is just a steel box in a swamp. Motionless. Dead to thermal images, if they existed. The Sergeant Major presses against the eyepieces of the binoculars. The world gets 6 times closer. The murky veil of rain becomes grainy. Through the net of drops, he sees him. The beast stands in a gap between trees. Grey, angular, alien. Oklopkov sees even the muzzle brake of his gun pointed toward the infantry. The German doesn't see them. He is busy. He is killing. At this moment, a switch flips in Oklopkov's consciousness. The logic of regulation combat, demanding exact data, firing tables, and corrections, turns off. Something ancient turns on. Ancestral memory. The instinct of a hunter who hits a squirrel in the eye, not because he knows the formula of bullet flight, but because he feels the wind, distance, and breath of the forest as part of himself. There, in Yakutia, in the taiga, there are no rangefinders. There are no Hertz panoramas. There is only the eye, the hand, and experience. Experience paid for with hunger and cold. If you miss a moose, you starve. If you miss a bear, you die. The stakes are the same as here, just the beast is now made of steel. Oklopkov begins to see not a tank, not an SPG, not a tactical unit. He sees prey. Vulnerable, smug prey that made the main mistake of hunting. It stopped being afraid. He puts his hands on the aiming hand wheels. His palms feel the cold metal. Now he is the brain of the machine. The gunner is his hands. The driver is his legs. They must become a single organism. Right. A little bit. More. Stop, he whispers, not tearing himself away from the binoculars. Higher. Barrel up. Smoothly. Don't jerk. They work blindly. The gunner turns the handles, not seeing the target. He trusts the commander's eyes. This is ultimate trust. This is a connection at the level of nerve endings. There is no aiming mark in the binoculars, no crosshairs. Ochlopkov must create it in his imagination. He must superimpose an invisible point of impact onto the armor of the German monster. He must account for parallax, the difference between the axis of the binoculars and the axis of the barrel. The binoculars are taped to the side, so the bullet, the shell, will go to the left of the point where the optics are looking. By how much? 10 centimeters? 20? At a distance of 1.5 kilometers, that's meters. He closes his eyes for a second, visualizing the geometry of the shot. A diagram floats up in his head. Triangle, leg, hypotenuse. To hell with geometry. Gut feeling. Left half a turn, he commands. The barrel shudders and shifts a millimeter. The battalion commander continues to yell in the headphones thrown on the seat, but Ochlopkov doesn't hear him anymore. In his world, only silence, a heartbeat, and gray armor in the circle of optics remain. The combat regulations of the armored and mechanized forces of the Red Army of 1944 is a book written in blood. It prescribes everything: how to march, how to dig in, how to attack, and how to die. But in it, there is not a single line about what to do when your machine is blinded and retreat is impossible. According to the paragraph on malfunctions, an Su-76 with broken sights is transferred to the category of tractors or is subject to repair in the rear. For a tanker, the situation is unambiguous. The battle is over. To continue it means to violate instruction and senselessly risk material assets. But Sergeant Major Fyodor Ochlopkov, in this second, stops being a tanker. In the cramped compartment soaked with the smell of burnt oil and fear, an invisible metamorphosis takes place. The husk of military ranks and military specialty numbers flies off. Only the essence remains. He is a Yakut, a hunter, a son of the taiga. In his world, thousands of kilometers from the Belarusian swamps, there are no optical sights. His grandfather had a flintlock rifle, his father an old Berdan rifle. There, no one talks about derivation or mills of range. There, they say, feel. Ochlopkov remembers his father's lessons. Winter, -50. The taiga rings from the frost. A squirrel sits on the top of a larch. It is small, like a grain. If you hit the body, the pelt is ruined, the family starves. You must hit the eye. There is no sight. The front sight is knocked off. You don't aim with your eyes. You continue the line of the barrel with your gaze. You become the bullet even before you pull the trigger. If the eye doesn't see, look with your head, Father used to say. This is the principle of instinctive shooting, high art accessible to few. But it's one thing, a rifle in hands that you feel like your own rib, and quite another, 12 tons of iron with a 76mm cannon that lives its own life. The ZIS-3 gun is a crude tool. It is a sledgehammer, and he needs the precision of a scalpel. Ochlopkov holds the German binoculars in his hands. Carl Zeiss Jena, 6 times magnification, 30mm entrance pupil, body of light alloy covered in shagreen leather. This is the pinnacle of European optical mechanics. Glasses transparent as a child's tear. Coated optics give a brighter picture than the naked eye sees. He treasured this trophy. Didn't trade it for tobacco, didn't drink it away, didn't give it as a gift. He knew that one day this German eye would come in handy. But he didn't think it would be like this. "Driver, give me rags! Insulation tape!" Ochlopkov yells without turning around. The driver, wiping his face with a dirty mitten, looks at the commander with undisguised horror. He sees the binoculars. He sees the barrel. And he understands the plan. "Comrade Sergeant Major," the driver's voice trembles. "What are you thinking? This is a circus." "Cut the chatter." "It won't hold. It'll fly to hell from the recoil. And the parallax, we'll be cross-eyed. The barrel is here and the binoculars are there. Half a meter difference." The driver is right. From the point of view of technical literacy, the idea of taping binoculars to a barrel is the raving of a madman. The axis of the barrel bore and the optical axis of the binoculars must be strictly parallel. Any deviation, even by a fraction of a millimeter, at a distance of 1.5 kilometers will give a miss of tens of meters. And how to set parallelism in field conditions, in the rain, by eye? "And you suggest sitting and waiting until they burn us?" Ochlopkov turns to the crew, his eyes narrowed, turning into 2 slits in which a cold fire burns. "Or maybe we'll get out and throw rocks at the Ferdinand." The loader is silent, clutching a shell to his chest. The gunner shakes his head, trying to shake the ringing of shell shock out of his ears. "We have no choice." Ochlopkov's voice becomes quiet and hard like sandpaper. "None. Either we make a sniper rifle out of this crap right now, or in 5 minutes they'll send us home in zinc boxes. In pieces." This is the moment of truth. The commander does not persuade. He breaks the crew's will, forcing them to believe in the impossible. He imposes his reality on them, where the laws of physics obey human will. "Listen to the task," Ochlopkov enunciates. "We put the binoculars on the breech part, closer to the shield. Less vibration there. Mount it rigidly, dead tight." "Mount it with what?" The mechanic still doubts, but his hands are already reaching into the toolbox. "No clamps." "Wire, tape. Strap it with your belt if you have to. Put rags underneath so the optics don't crack against the steel." "And the alignment? How do we zero it?" asks the gunner. A professional question. Without zeroing, it's just a pipe. "By the barrel bore," cuts off Ochlopkov. "Grandfather's method. Open the breech." The loader pulls the breech handle. The massive wedge goes down. The round opening of the breech opens. Through the barrel, a gray circle of light is visible, the exit hole of the muzzle brake. "Look through the barrel," the sergeant major commands the gunner. "Catch the target. Center the barrel on that dry stump." The gunner presses against the breech. This is an old artillery method of checking sights. Bore sighting. Usually this is done on a range, in a calm environment, using special boards. Here, under freezing rain, in a machine shaking from nearby explosions. "I see the stump," reports the gunner. His voice is hollow, like from a barrel. "Keep it in the center. Don't breathe. Driver, don't move. I'll kill you." Ochlopkov puts the binoculars to the barrel from above. He looks into the eyepieces. The stump is shifted. Shifted significantly. The axis of the binoculars looks into the sky and to the left. The curvature of the barrel surface doesn't let it lie flat. Here it is, an engineering task on the verge of madness. Combine the incompatible. A cylindrical binocular body on a conical barrel surface. "Needs spacers," mutters Ochlopkov. "Thicker here, thinner there." He tears rags into strips. Fingers work fast, deftly. These are hands that know how to set snares, tie knots in the frost, fix tackle in total darkness. Right now, these hands are trying to cheat geometry. "Comrade Sergeant Major, the battalion commander again," starts the loader, glancing sideways at the radio. "Turn it off," growls Ochlopkov, "so it doesn't buzz. I need silence." The loader flips the toggle switch. The hiss of the ether cuts off. Only the breathing of 4 people and the sound of rain remain in the compartment. Cut off from the world, they remain alone with their problem. This creates a special, chamber-like tension, like in a submarine lying on the bottom. Oklopkov puts a layer of oily fabric under the right objective of the binoculars. Checks. Better. Another layer. Another. Now the vertical almost matches. Horizontal remains. Zeiss binoculars are delicate things. They are not designed for the hundreds of Gs of overload arising from a shot. Lenses can fly out of frames. Prisms can shift. Oklopkov understands. They will have only one guaranteed shot. After the first shot, the recoil will most likely tear off this entire contraption, or smash the optics to smithereens. It is a disposable sight. A glass eye for an iron beast. Give me the wire. Oklopkov reaches out his hand. The mechanic hands over a coil of steel baling wire. It is stiff, springy, rusty. The sergeant major begins to strap the binoculars to the barrel. He makes turn after turn, tightening loops with force that makes the wire bite into the rubber eye cups and the gun paint. Pull, he commands the gunner. Hold the binoculars, I'll pull. They work with 4 hands. Dirty fingers slip. The wire tears skin. Blood appears, but no one pays attention. Pain right now is just a nervous system signal that can be ignored. This is barbarism. Any German engineer seeing what is being done to his creation would shoot himself in horror. A precision optical instrument is being screwed with rusty wire to a dirty cannon, like a piece of pipe to a fence. But in this barbarism, there is its own terrible aesthetic. The aesthetic of survival. When high technology fails before the brute force of circumstances, the one who knows how to adapt wins. Ingenuity against instruction. Oklopkov ties the last knot, nips off the excess with wire cutters. The binoculars sit crookedly, wrapped in rags and wire like a wounded soldier. Looks ugly, but it holds. Check, exhales Oklopkov. He looks into the eyepieces. There is no crosshair, but there is the center of the field of view. Gunner, stump in the center of the barrel? Yes, sir, in the center. Oklopkov looks into the binoculars. In his field of view, the stump is shifted to the right and down. Aha. He memorizes this point. So, we'll aim with this little spot on the lens. He found a landmark, a tiny scratch on the left lens. If you aim it at the target, the barrel will look where needed. This is their surrogate crosshair. The correction is introduced mechanically, by the poke method and rigid fixation. Done. Oklopkov wipes sweat from his forehead. A black streak of oil remains on his arm. Now we have eyes. Crooked, cross-eyed, but eyes. He looks at the crew. Panic is gone from their eyes. Interest has appeared. Hope has appeared. The commander's madness turned out to be contagious. They saw a method in his insanity. Load subcaliber, commands Oklopkov. Voice calm, every day, as if asking to pass the salt. Now this is not just the crew of a hit self-propelled gun. Now it is a single mechanism, assembled on wire and willpower. The hunt begins for real. Freezing rain turns the armor into a skating rink. Hands slide on wet metal, finding no grip. This is not a mechanic's work in a warm bay. This is a fight against entropy in the center of a swamp. The air temperature is +4 degrees, but because of humidity and wind, it feels like deep sub-zero. Fingers lose sensitivity. Fine motor skills fail. To tie a knot, one has to exert effort with the whole hand, but muscles cramp. Sergeant Major Oklopkov tightens the last turn of the field telephone cable. The steel core in black insulation cuts into the skin. The cable is stiff, unruly, its springs trying to unwind. Oklopkov uses pliers as a lever, twisting the ends into a pigtail. The insulation bursts, exposing steel. Sharp wire tears the pad of the thumb. Blood comes out in a thick, dark drop, mixes with oil and rainwater, but there is no pain. Cold is an excellent anesthetic. Pain will come later when the adrenaline subsides. Right now, it's just physics. The coefficient of friction of the cable against the barrel must exceed the recoil force of the gun. If the binoculars slide even a millimeter during the shot, the second shell will go wide. "Hold tighter!" he growls at the gunner, who presses the optics to the cold steel of the barrel. The gunner is shivering. His teeth chattering is audible even through the noise of the rain. He is in just a tunic, soaked to the bone. The body burns calories at a furious speed, trying to warm vital organs. Periphery, hands and feet, shut down. This is survival physiology. The body sacrifices limbs to save the brain. The contraption looks monstrous. German binoculars taped to a Soviet cannon with pieces of wire, torn rags, and scraps of belts. A dirty gray mass of rags serves as a damper, dampening vibration. On top is a cocoon of wire. It is an insult to any engineering school. But it works. Oklopkov checks the rigidity of the mount, hits the barrel with his fist. The binoculars sit dead tight. They became part of the gun. Parasitic play is eliminated. Now, movement logistics come into play. The horizontal sector of fire of the ZIS-3 gun mounted in the Su-76 fighting compartment is limited. Only 15 degrees left and 15 right. This is not enough. The target, the German Ferdinand, is at the limit of this sector. To aim precisely, the entire self-propelled gun needs to be turned. This is a task for the driver. And this is the hardest part of the equation. Turning a 12-ton machine on solid ground is routine. Turning it in a swamp, on shaky corduroy logs, without falling into the quagmire and throwing off the rough aiming. This is art on the verge of magic. "Driver, listen here." Oklopkov leans toward the driver's hatch. "We work with jewelry precision. I need a hull turn to the left. By a matchbox, understood? By a matchbox, no more." The driver's face in the hatch opening is grey, like swamp sludge. He understands the price of a mistake. The Su-76 is steered by side clutches. It is crude mechanics. You pull the lever, the clutch disengages, the track breaks, the machine turns. But in the swamp, traction with the ground is unpredictable. The track might slip, the machine might jerk. A jerk will knock off the binoculars, and the whole job will have to start over. And there is no time. "Start up!" commands Oklopkov. The starter whines. GAZ-203 engines reluctantly wake up. Exhaust pipes spit out clouds of blue smoke. The sound of the motor in the silence of the forest seems deafening. Germans might hear. But there is no choice. The noise of rain and wind slightly masks the engine operation, but the risk of unmasking is huge. Every second of engine operation brings death closer. "Left back! Right stop!" commands the sergeant major, looking at the tracks. The mechanic smoothly, millimeter by millimeter, pulls the left lever toward himself. The track tightens. The links, steel segments, bite into the slimy logs of the road and soft ground. The crunch of wood and squelching of mud are heard. The machine shudders. The hull begins to crawl slowly to the left. "Easy! Easy, damn it!" whispers Oklopkov, seeing the left track starting to dig in. If it digs deeper, the SPG will list. A change in list of even 1 degree will lead the barrel away from the target vertically by meters. The driver works the gas pedal and clutches, trying to catch the balance. He feels the machine with his butt. He feels the ground sagging under the left side. He compensates for this by adding a few revs so the track doesn't spin out, but pulls. It is a dance on a razor blade. One wrong movement with the foot, and the SPG will either jump or sit on its belly. Vibration of the hull transmits to the barrel. Oklopkov presses against the binocular eyepieces. The image jumps. Forest, fog, outlines of the Ferdinand, everything dances in a wild rhythm. Aiming is impossible at such a moment. Need to catch a pause. Just a little more. Come on, baby. He coaxes the iron. The hull of the SPG turns in place with a grind. Stop! Yells Oklopkov. The mechanic instantly drops the levers and depresses the main clutch. The machine dips its nose and freezes. Inertia is dampened by the viscosity of the soil. Oklopkov sticks to the binoculars again. His heart beats in his throat, echoing in his temples. He looks for his mark, that same scratch on the lens that replaces the crosshair. The scratch is aimed almost perfectly, slightly above the left road wheel of the German SPG. This is rough aiming. The gunner will do the fine-tuning with the gun hand wheels. The main thing is, the hull stands correctly. The sector is taken. Kill it! The command falls like a heavy stone. The motors sneeze and go silent. Silence returns, but now it is different. It is not the silence of waiting. It is the silence of a cocked hammer. Oklopkov slides down the armor to the bottom of the fighting compartment. Legs won't hold him. The tension of the last minutes drank all his strength. He looks at his hands. They are black from oil and mud, in abrasions and cuts. Blood on the thumb has already baked into a crust. He doesn't feel the cold. He feels only the vibration that still lives in his body, the phantom trembling of the diesel. Gunner, to the gun! Voices husky. Check horizon. Check vertical. Turn hand wheels gently, like you're petting a woman. Understood? Understood, Comrade Sergeant Major. The gunner, hunched over, begins to rotate the aiming handles. Gear sectors creak. Grease has thickened from the cold. Every degree of barrel turn requires physical effort. Right now, inside this box open to all winds, the sacrament of ballistics is taking place. They are calculating death. Without computers, without laser rangefinders, without weather stations. Only intuition, mechanics, and muscle memory. Oklopkov raises his head. Rain floods his face. He licks drops from his lips. Water tastes like iron. They did everything they could. The engineering task is solved. The wire holds. The machine stands in the alignment. Shell in the breech. Now begins the scariest part. Now begins psychology. Physics has ended. Time comes into force. The German there, 1.5 kilometers away, lives his own life. He doesn't know he is being watched. He doesn't know he is already being aimed at. This knowledge gives an advantage, but it also weighs down. The crew of the Su-76 sits in an icy puddle on the floor of the compartment. Can't stand up, will be spotted. Can't move unnecessarily, the machine will sway. Need to turn into stone, become part of the swamp. Waiting is worse than working. When you turn nuts or pull levers, you have no time to be afraid. When you sit and wait, fear crawls under your clothes. It whispers that the wire won't hold, that the shell is defective, that the German will shoot first. Oklopkov looks at the ammo box. 12 armor-piercing rounds left there. 12 chances. But in reality, there is one chance. Humidity 100%. Breath turns into steam. This steam is an unmasking factor. "Breathe into the sleeve," commands the sergeant major. "Don't open your mouths." They sit, noses buried in dirty quilted jackets. Steam condenses on the wool, settles as frost. The war has shrunk to the size of this compartment. The whole world has disappeared. Only the axis of the barrel bore remains, passing through the German binoculars, and the point on the enemy armor where the steel slug must strike. The heavy, dirty work is done. Now the endurance of a beast is needed. What distinguishes a hunter from prey? The ability to wait for the moment when the heartbeat coincides with the pause between wind gusts. Silence on the front is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of explosions. All other space is filled with noise that in peacetime would seem deafening, but here is perceived as silence. Rain drums on armor sheets. The swamp squelches, digesting drowned equipment. Somewhere far away, on the flanks, machine guns are working. But this sound comes dully, like through cotton wool. The Su-76 engine is killed. This is a critically important tactical decision. A running Gaz-203 engine, even at idle, emits blue exhaust. In conditions of high humidity and low cloud cover, this smoke does not dissipate, but hangs in a dense cloud, unmasking the position better than any flag. Furthermore, the vibration of a running engine transmits to the hull, and from the hull to the gun barrel. The sight, screwed on with wire, will not tolerate such shaking. Any micro-vibration on the eyepieces will turn the target into a blurry spot. That is why they sit in silence. And in the cold. The fighting compartment of the self-propelled gun is open at the top. This design feature, lightening the weight and cheapening production, now works against the crew. Freezing rain pours right inside, meeting no obstacles. Water accumulates on the corrugated floor, mixing with oil, mud, and blood dripping from the gunner's broken head. The level of this icy sludge already covers the soles of boots. Body temperature drops. First toes go numb. Then cold rises higher, shackling calves and knees. Circulation slows down. The body engages emergency heat preservation mode, shutting off the periphery. Tremors begin. This is physiology that cannot be controlled by willpower. Muscles contract by themselves, trying to generate at least a little heat. But one cannot shiver. Shivering transmits to the machine. The Su-76 is a light SPG. It reacts sensitively to any movement inside. If the loader starts chattering his teeth and shaking with his whole body, the gun barrel will start to walk. "Don't shake," whispers Oklopkov. His lips have turned blue. Face became the color of wet clay. "Breathe evenly. Relax muscles." This is the technique of a hunter sitting in an ambush on a salt lick. When you wait for a beast in winter, you might sit motionless for 5, 6, 10 hours. If you start shivering, snow under you will crunch. The beast will hear. The beast will leave. Here the beast won't leave. Here the beast will shoot. The sergeant major looks at his people. They have turned into ice statues. The driver is pressed into the seat, hugging himself with his arms. The gunner hid his hands in the sleeves of his quilted jacket. The loader sits squatting, trying to preserve heat in a fetal position. Their faces express dull, animal suffering. War at this moment is not an attack and not heroism. It is torture by the environment. It is the ability to endure discomfort incompatible with life and at the same time maintain combat readiness. And ahead, in the gray veil, stands the Ferdinand. It is silent. It hasn't fired for 3 minutes. This is a bad sign. It means the German commander has calmed down. He suppressed the infantry resistance. He sees burning trucks, sees corpses on the log road, and considers the job done. Now he just controls the perimeter. He is the king of the hill. The Ferdinand is confident in its invulnerability, and it has grounds for that. 200 millimeters of frontal armor. Not a single Soviet cannon of 76 millimeter caliber will penetrate it head-on, even at point-blank range. Shells will bounce off it like peas off a wall. The fog begins to thin. The wind blowing from the north tears the dense curtain of rain. Visibility improves. On one hand, this is good. Ochlopkov will be able to aim better through his homemade optical prosthesis. On the other hand, it is deadly dangerous. If the fog goes away completely, the German observer will see them. The Su-76 stands in the brush, but this cover is conditional. Foliage is sparse, branches are bare, no camouflage net. The only protection is immobility. The predator's eye reacts to movement. While they are frozen, they are part of the landscape. As soon as they move, they are a target. Ochlopkov presses against the binoculars. Lenses fog up from the proximity of the face. He has to hold his breath. In the circle of view, he sees the German self-propelled gun frighteningly clearly. It stands at a semi-broadside to them. This is luck. This is that very chance, 1 in a million. Side armor on the Ferdinand is thinner, 80 millimeters. It is still a lot for an old BR-350A armor-piercing shell, but no longer hopeless. If hit at a right angle, if hit in a vulnerable spot. The German crew behaves carelessly. The commander's cupola hatch is ajar. A thin stream of cigarette smoke rises from there. They are smoking. They are drinking coffee from thermoses. They are discussing how many Russians they killed today. For them, the battle is over. They are just waiting for orders to move out or change position. This overconfidence is their only weak spot. Ochlopkov feels cold hatred boiling inside him. Not furious, hot anger that makes you scream, "Hurrah!" and run at machine guns, but that heavy, dark hatred that allows a hunter to wait for hours until the prey exposes its flank for a shot. Patience, he whispers again, like a mantra. Patience is a weapon. Time stretches. Seconds drip just as slowly as water from the headset visor. It seems an eternity has passed. The crew starts to crack. The psyche cannot withstand the tension of silence. "Sergeant Major, let's hit it!" The loader's voice trembles, breaking into a cry. "I can't take it anymore. We see him. Let's bang and come what may." "Belay that." Ochlopkov's voice sounds like the crack of a whip. "Too early. Wind is dying down. Fog is tearing into shreds. A window opens now. Full window." He doesn't explain that shooting through fog strips is impossible. They distort the silhouette, refract light. One can mistake the distance estimation. Need to wait for ideal transparency. Need to wait until the physics of the atmosphere stops being an enemy and becomes an ally. Waiting for the shot is scarier than the shot itself. In battle, you act on reflexes. In an ambush, you think. And thinking in war is harmful. Thoughts birth fear. You start imagining what happens if the shell doesn't pierce the armor. What happens if the wire loosens? What happens if the German turns the turret? Although he has no turret, he turns the whole hull. Ochlopkov chases these thoughts away. He forces himself to turn into a function. He is not a man who has children left at home in Yakutia. He is a computing center. Wind, 2 meters per second, crosswind. Distance, 1500. Target elevation angle, 0. Charge temperature, +4. All these data load into the brain, process, output corrections. The gunner's hand rests on the vertical aiming hand wheel, fingers turned white. He is ready to turn the barrel at the first sign. The driver froze, hands on knees. It is hardest for him right now. He sees nothing and can do nothing. He just sits in an iron box that at any second can become his coffin. This is special courage, trusting your life to someone else's gut feeling. A self-propelled gun is not a tank. It is an open grave in which you have to manage to survive. There is no feeling of security here. You hear every rustle outside. You smell the forest, smell burning, smell death. Walls don't save. They only limit the view. Suddenly the wind picks up. A gust blows the remnants of fog off the log road. The sun, dull, blurry, peeks through the clouds for a second, illuminating the swamp with deathly light. The Ferdinand appears in all its glory. Huge, angular, predatory. Oil streaks, tactical marking numbers, Zimmerit chips are visible on its side. Even mud stuck to the tracks is visible. It begins to move. The clank of tracks tears the silence. The multi-ton hulk shudders, releasing a cloud of black smoke. He turns. He is looking for new targets. His barrel begins to slowly crawl to the right, toward the bushes, toward the Su-76. "Spotted," exhales the gunner. "No," Okhlopkov cuts off harshly. "He's just checking the sector. If he's spotted, he'd be shooting already. Don't twitch. Sit quiet, like mice under a broom." The 88mm barrel looks straight at them. The black muzzle seems like a huge eye looking into the soul. It seems the German gunner right now sees their trembling hands, their dilated pupils. The instinct of self-preservation screams, "Shoot! Shoot first, before he shoots!" But reason says, no. The German barrel passes by. He didn't stop. He slid his gaze over the bushes and went further. He didn't see them. For him, they are just a hummock, a pile of branches. Okhlopkov exhales air he seems to have held in his lungs for 5 minutes. The Ferdinand exposed its flank. Now it stands perfectly. At an angle of 90 degrees to the line of fire, target area maximum, effective armor thickness minimum. The moment has arrived. The beast's endurance bore fruit. The prey relaxed, opened its neck. Now it is not up to patience. Now it is up to mathematics and reaction. Okhlopkov grips the binoculars tighter. Wire bites into the sight. "Gunner, get ready." Voice sounds quiet, but in this silence, it is like thunder. "Target, side, under the casemate, into the ammo rack." Seconds remain, seconds into which life is compressed. Carl Zeiss optics do not lie. They show the world as it is, cold, gray, and sharp. But in this world, there are no hints. In the eyepieces of the German binoculars, there is no goniometric grid, no range scale by which distance to the target can be determined knowing its height, no chevrons for windage corrections. This is pure optics for observation, not a tool for shooting. Before Sergeant Major Okhlopkov's eyes is just a round picture, in the center of which stands death, packed in 200 tons of armor. Fyodor Okhlopkov looks into the trembling lenses. His breath stopped so the glass won't fog. Right now his brain works faster than any mechanical arithmometer. He needs to solve an equation with 3 unknowns, where the price of error is the life of the entire crew. First variable, gravity. A 76mm caliber shell is not a laser beam. It has mass, 6 kilograms, 200 grams. Flying out of the barrel at a speed of about 700 meters per second, it immediately begins to fall. At direct fire range, up to 500 meters, the trajectory is almost flat. One can aim right at the silhouette, but to the Ferdinand, it is 1,500 meters. At such a distance, the shell trajectory is a steep arc, a parabola. The shell must fly high up, fly over the swamp, and crash down on the enemy from above. If Ochlopkov aims the crosshair, more precisely that very scratch on the lens, right at the side of the German machine, the shell won't reach. It will bury itself in the mud some 200 meters before the target. You can't cheat physics. To hit, you need to aim into the void, into the gray, faceless sky above the German's turret. How much higher? 1 hull? 2? 1.5? Manuals are silent. Firing tables, which he crammed in training, give exact numbers in mils of distance. Sight such and such, level such and such. But he has no sight to set these mils. He has only by eye. Second variable, wind. The sergeant major sees the tops of rare birches bending on the edge of the swamp. Wind is crosswind, gusty, left to right. Speed, about 5 to 7 meters per second. For a heavy slug, this is a serious force. The wind will push on the shell all 2 seconds of flight, drifting it to the side. At 1.5 kilometers, the drift will be 2 meters, or even 3, meaning aiming needs to be not only higher, but also to the left. Into the void above the forest, to the left of the German SPG's stern. The point of aim is in the air, nowhere. This contradicts human nature. Instinct demands aiming the weapon at the enemy. Reason demands aiming the weapon at an empty spot. This struggle inside consciousness lasts a fraction of a second. Ochlopkov closes his eyes for a moment. He turns off tanker logic and turns on hunter memory. Taiga, a larch 10 stories high. At the very top sits a squirrel. Wind sways the tree. You stand below with a small caliber rifle. You don't calculate trajectory with formulas. You feel it. You imagine an invisible thread stretching from the barrel to the target. This thread curves under its own weight. It gets blown by the wind. You must feel this curve with your body. You must become an extension of the barrel. Beast is standing, thinks Ochlopkov. Beast is big, but kill zone is small. The ammo rack on the Ferdinand is in the rear part of the casemate. Shells are stored there. If hit there, detonation tears the machine apart from inside. If hit in the engine, it just catches fire. Crew has time to jump out. If hit in the suspension, you break a track, but the gun stays intact, and he kills you. Need only 1 shot, straight to the heart. He opens his eyes. The picture in the binoculars stabilized. Gunner, Ochlopkov's whisper is barely audible. Listen to my hand. He puts his palm on the gunner's shoulder. This is their communication channel. Voice commands are too slow. Nerve impulse is faster than a word. Vertical. Up, he commands. Smoothly. More. More. The barrel of the ZIS-3 gun crawls up. In the binoculars, the silhouette of the Ferdinand drops lower. Now Ochlopkov sees only the top of the casemate and sky. Higher, even higher, whispers the inner voice. He takes vertical lead by 2 bast shoes. This is an old artillery measure of length, having nothing to do with the SI system. It is intuition. He feels the weight of the shell, feels how gravity will pull it to the ground. Stop vertical! The gunner freezes. The teeth of the aiming mechanism gears meshed dead tight. The barrel looks into the sky, significantly higher than the target. To an outside observer, it looks like they are about to shoot down a plane. Horizontal. Left, continues Ochlopkov. Go against the wind. Pull! The barrel shifts left. Now, in the binocular field of view, There isn't even the edge of the German machine, only gray bushes and air. It is scary. Aiming into the void is an act of faith. Faith in one's intuition, in physics, in luck. Ochlopkov looks for that scratch on the lens. It now hangs in the air, to the left and higher than the supposed location of the target. He mentally draws the arc of flight. In his imagination, the shell flies out, fights the wind, describes a curve, and falls exactly into the side. Took too much, he corrects himself. Wind is dying down. A little right, half a turn, stop! Now everything froze. The geometry of the shot is built, the equation is solved, the answer is received, but its correctness can only be checked by practice. The self-propelled gun, the crew, the binoculars, and the target, for a second, become a single system, a closed loop. Ochlopkov feels a trickle of sweat running down his back, cold as ice. The gunner's hands on the hand wheels are shaking, but the hand wheels stand dead still. All slack is taken up. At this moment, the concept of technology disappears. No more steel, gunpowder, optics. There is only human will sending death to a distance of 1.5 kilometers. This is no longer ballistics. This is telekinesis amplified by the chemistry of explosives. Hold it like that, exhales Ochlopkov. He pulls away from the eyepieces. Looking into taped binoculars at the moment of the shot is impossible. Recoil can knock an eye out. He memorized the picture. It imprinted on the retina. Gray sky, pine top, and the void into which the barrel looks. This is the mathematics of war. Not formulas in a textbook, but the sensation of inevitability of a hit. The feeling when you release a bowstring and already know the arrow will hit the mark. But here the bowstring is a charge of gunpowder weighing almost a kilogram, and you can release it only once. Ochlopkov looks at the breech. The massive breech block wedge is closed. The firing pin is cocked. The lanyard hangs before the gunner. "Prepare!" The sergeant major's voice sounds every day, like in training. But in this calmness is the extreme tension of a spring ready to uncoil. The loader turns away, covering ears with hands and opening mouth to equalize pressure. The driver pulls his head into his shoulders. They all understand. Right now, their fate will be decided. Either they are heroes or corpses. There is no third option. The machine stands on shaky ground. Upon firing, it will rock back. Barrel recoil will use up the full length. The casing will fly out, hit the guard. The roar will rupture eardrums even if ears are plugged. But that will be later. Right now, there is only the infinitely lasting second before the command. Ochlopkov, again quickly, with one eye, peeks into the binoculars. Did the German leave? Did the aim get knocked off? Everything is in place. The German stands. Wind slightly sways a branch in the field of view. The scratch on the lens looks into the calculated point of the void. Calculation finished. Doubts cast aside. Now only action. Intuitive ballistics finished its work. Next, combustion chemistry and destruction mechanics come into play. Ochlopkov takes air into his lungs. Air smells of burning and dampness. This is the taste of war. His hand rises for the signal. The gesture is sharp, chopped, like an axe blow. Math gives way to death. On the corduroy road, among ground-up logs and human bodies, movement occurs. One of the surviving infantrymen, shell-shocked, disoriented, rises on his elbows. He doesn't understand what he is doing. Instinct drives him away from the smell of death, but instead of crawling back into the saving sludge, he tries to stand up. His silhouette, a dirty gray figure in a blood-soaked overcoat, separates for a second from the background of the swamp. This second is enough. There, on the sandy island, 1.5 kilometers away, the German observer in the Ferdinand commander's cupola notices the contrast. The periscope transmits the picture to the SPG commander's brain. Reaction is instantaneous. It is a reflex honed by years of war on the Eastern Front. Anything that moves must be destroyed. The huge barrel, resembling a telegraph pole, jerks. Hydraulics and mechanics come into motion. 88 millimeters of death begin a slow, smooth turn to the right. Sergeant Major Oklopkov sees this through his crude optics. In the field of view of the wire-taped binoculars, the long needle of the German gun shifts. It is looking for a victim. It is aiming where the wounded man lies. Time, which until now dragged like thick tar, suddenly compresses into a tight spring. Cold disappears. Trembling disappears. Fatigue disappears. The world narrows to one point, the muzzle brake of the German cannon. Oklopkov sees the first puff of smoke escape from this muzzle brake. This is not the shell yet. It is the harbinger. Gases break through faster than metal. Flash. A bright, unbearably white ball of fire blooms in the gray fog. The German fired. In the same fraction of a second, while the image of the flash flies through the retina to the brain, Oklopkov parts his lips. He doesn't need to think. The decision is made at the spinal cord level.
Fire!
The scream tears out of his chest along with the air, tearing his throat. This is not a word. It is a trigger mechanism. The gunner's hand lying on the lanyard jerks. This movement is faster than thought. Muscles contract by themselves, obeying another's will. The steel firing pin inside the ZIS-3 breech breaks off the sear. The spring pushes it forward. The tip of the firing pin strikes the primer of the unitary cartridge. The chemistry of destruction begins. The primer composition ignites instantly. A jet of fire punches through the diaphragm and ignites the propellant charge. Kilograms of nitroglycerin powder packed in a brass casing turn into gas in thousandths of a second. Pressure in the barrel chamber jumps to 2,500 atmospheres. This is pressure capable of tearing steel apart, were it not for the engineer's calculation. Gas needs an exit. The only exit is blocked by the bottom of the shell. The subcaliber shell, spool, weighing just over 3 kilograms, begins to move. The driving band bites into the barrel rifling. Friction is monstrous. Metal strips against metal, spinning the slug around the longitudinal axis. The shell accelerates down the barrel channel 3.5 meters long. Speed grows exponentially. 0, 100, 500, 900 meters per second. This happens inside, in the darkness of the steel pipe, but outside, it looks like a catastrophe. The light Su-76 self-propelled gun, weighing only 11 tons, is not designed for such recoil without spades. When the shell leaves the barrel, reactive force throws the machine back. The Su-76 jumps. The front road wheels tear off the shaky soil by a good 20 centimeters. The hull shudders as if hit by a giant's sledgehammer. Mud from tracks flies in all directions like a fan. The muzzle brake of the ZIS-3 gun works efficiently, diverting part of the powder gases to the sides and back to dampen recoil. But for the crew in the open compartment, it is hell. The shock wave hits the ears, knocking air out of lungs. A cloud of red-hot gases and unburnt powder particles covers the compartment. "Ah!" screams the loader, not hearing himself. The casing, heated to 100 degrees, flies out of the breech with a clang, hits the rear wall of the guard, and falls to the bottom, into the puddle of icy water. Water instantly boils, hissing with steam. But the most important thing happens on the barrel. The construction of wire, rags, and German binoculars experiences an overload of hundreds of Gs. Steel wire bites into the aluminum body of the binoculars, stripping paint and leather. Rags compress into stone, glass rings ready to crack. At the moment of the shot, the barrel performs a complex oscillatory process. Barrel whip. The binoculars jerk along with it. The aim is knocked off. The picture in the optics disappeared, replaced by a gray haze of smoke. But the shell has already left. It no longer depends on the crew, or the machine, or the wire. It is an independent body flying along a ballistic curve. A small, hard tungsten carbide core hidden in a soft jacket slices the air. It flies faster than sound. It outruns the roar of its own birth. Ochlopkov, thrown by recoil against the compartment wall, frantically tries to hold on. He doesn't look into the binoculars. Nothing is visible there. He looks over the shield, with his own eyes watering from fumes. 1,500 meters. Flight time, just under 2 seconds. 1. The shell pierces the veil of rain. Rotation stabilizes its flight. It goes along that very high arc the Yakut hunter drew in his imagination. It fights the crosswind. Wind pushes on it, trying to drift it to the right, but initial velocity is too high and inertia is too great. The shell holds course. It goes into the void, which must become the target. 2. The trajectory begins to descend. The shell falls. Gravity pulls it down, to the ground, to the swamp, to the armor. On the other end of the arc, on the sandy island, the Ferdinand crew just pulled the trigger. Their shell flew out too. 2 pieces of metal fly toward each other, passing in the air by tens of meters. One, huge, high explosive, flies to kill an infantryman. The second, small, sub-caliber, flies to kill a machine. The German gunner still sees the target in his sight. He is confident of a hit. He doesn't know death is already knocking at his door. The Su-76 falls back onto the ground with a crash. Suspension groans, taking the machine's weight. Rocking, the SPG freezes. Silence after the shot seems absolute, though war continues to make noise around. The crew is deafened, ringing in ears. Ochlopkov looks forward. Heart skips a beat. Where is it? Where is the explosion? Usually, if a shell hits ground or water, a column of dirt rises. Short or long, it is visible immediately. But there is no column. There is nothing. Only the gray hulk of the Ferdinand in the haze, and a cloud of powder gases slowly drifting away from its barrel. Did he miss? Did the shell go into the swamp without exploding? Ricochet into the sky? A second stretches into eternity. Ochlopkov feels everything drop inside. Miss. It's the end. Now the German will reload. Now he will turn the barrel onto the flash. Now. He frantically grabs the binoculars, trying to make out at least something. Optics are knocked off, looking crooked, but the German SPG falls into the edge of the field of view. It stands, motionless. The Germans' shot, the one they saw as a flash, exploded somewhere on the log road. But there is no return fire.
Well?
Wheezes the driver.
What?
Ochlopkov is silent. He doesn't breathe. He waits for physics. A sub-caliber shell contains no explosives. It is just a slug, a crowbar. It pierces armor due to kinetic energy. Upon impact, there is no fireball like in movies. There is only a sheaf of sparks and the sound of impact. A dry, hard crack, like a hammer hitting an anvil. At a distance of 1.5 kilometers, this sound is heard with a delay of 4.5 seconds. And here it comes. Clang! The sound reaches them. Distinct, metallic clang. Not squelching of mud, not a dull thud into wood. Metal on metal. Hit. But where? The Ferdinand's armor is thick. If the shell hit the front, it just bounced off, leaving a dent. If it hit the track, the German is alive and can shoot. Need a result. Need a secondary reaction of the system. Oklopkov digs his eyes into the gray silhouette. The Ferdinand is silent. Its barrel froze. Smoke from its shot dissipated. And suddenly, from the open hatch on the roof of the German casemate, the very one through which they smoked, a thin stream breaks out. First, it is just gray smoke, lazy, almost invisible. But in a moment it changes color, becomes black, greasy, and then, soundlessly for the observer, a tongue of flame spills out of the hatch, bright, orange, unnatural against the background of the gray swamp. Inside the German machine occurred what tankers call thermal destruction. The tungsten core of the Soviet shell, piercing 80 millimeters of side armor, flew into the fighting compartment. Upon piercing armor, kinetic energy turned into thermal. Armor fragments and red-hot pieces of the core hit the powder charge rack. Cordite, German smokeless powder, does not detonate instantly. It ignites. Combustion temperature, thousands of degrees. Pressure inside the closed box of the Ferdinand jumped instantly. Fire looks for an exit, and it found it through the open hatch. "Burning," whispers the loader. "Burning, the bastard!" The tongue of flame becomes a column. Now it is a torch 3 meters high. And only now arrives the sound of the explosion. A dull, guttural boom. The load of high-explosive shells detonated. The heavy roof of the Ferdinand's casemate jumps like a lid on a boiling pot and falls back, skewed. Smoke pours from all cracks, from embrasures, from the engine compartment. The beast is killed, shot to the heart. Oklopkov slowly sinks onto a box. Legs won't hold. Adrenaline, which kept him toned for the last half hour, leaves, leaving emptiness and weakness behind. Hands start shaking so much he can't unbutton the collar of his tunic. He looks at the binoculars. Wire loosened, optics slid to the side, and looks at the floor. Lenses covered in soot. The homemade sight died along with the shot. It fulfilled its task. Once. "We hit," says the driver, and in his voice sounds not joy but sincere, childlike surprise.
Comrade Sergeant Major, we hit.
This is not a victory, in the sense painted on posters. It is just a fact. A physical fact. The velocity vector of the shell intersected with the existence vector of the German machine at the only possible point in space and time. And they did it. Blind. In a swamp. With wire and rags. The radio, which they forgot to turn back on, is silent. But on the corduroy road, where the infantry lies, something changes. First, timidly, then louder, through the noise of the rain, comes a many-voiced scream. It is not a scream of pain. It is that terrifying Russian scream that makes the enemy's blood run cold. The infantry sees the torch. The infantry understands that the hammer is broken. The press is stopped. The way is clear. Oklopkov wipes his face. On his palm remains a mixture of sweat, soot, and blood from the smashed finger. He is alive. The crew is alive. The arithmetic of death today tallied in their favor.
The recoil of 76 caliber does not just shake the machine.
It destroys the fragile symbiosis of man, optics, and steel created by desperation. At the moment of the shot, the wire holding the binoculars stretches. The knot, tightened by the sergeant major's bloody fingers, creeps. The German Zeiss, taking the shock overload of hundreds of units, slides to the side, hanging on the barrel as a useless weight. Lenses looking to the mud. The eye went blind, finally. But it no longer matters. The ballistic theorem is proven. Through the gas-filled compartment, through ringing in ears and watering eyes, the crew looks forward. There, where a second ago stood the invulnerable lord of the swamp. At first, nothing happens. Only grey smoke and rain. Silence presses on eardrums deafened by the shot. In this silence, there is something ominous, like the calm before a tsunami. And then, the laws of thermodynamics come into their own. Over the German position, tearing the greyness of the day, the sun rises. But it is not a celestial body. It is a man-made hell. A column of fire 15 meters high bursts from the hull of the Ferdinand. This is not just fuel burning. This is ammo detonation. 50 shells of 88mm caliber, each filled with powerful explosive and powder charge, go off almost simultaneously. Inside the closed armored hull, pressure jumps to tens of thousands of atmospheres. Steel, even the best Krupp steel, cannot hold such energy. Weld seams burst with a sound like rifle shots. The heavy casemate of the SPG, weighing tons, lifts like a lid on a boiling cauldron and crashes back down with a roar, skewed, opening the machine's insides to the sky. The sound wave from the explosion reaches the Su-76 with a delay. It is a low, vibrating blow felt not by ears, but by the chest. The ground under the tracks shudders. "Got him," exhales the gunner. He doesn't scream. He has no strength to scream. He just states a fact. There, where a minute ago stood an ideal killing machine, now smokes a bonfire of iron and flesh. Fire hums, devouring rubber tires, oil, paint, and everything that was inside. Black, greasy smoke rises vertically up, mixing with rain clouds. This smoke is visible for kilometers. It is a signal. For the infantry lying on the log road, this explosion is like an alarm bell tearing them out of a nightmare. A minute ago they were meat. They pressed into wet logs, prayed to all known gods, and waited for their turn to die. Above them hung the sword of Damocles of the German sight. The psyche of people was crushed by hopelessness. The battalion commander, hoarse from screaming, was already mentally writing death notifications for the entire personnel. And suddenly, the pressure disappeared. The press broke. They see the torch. They see the Ferdinand turning into a pile of scrap metal. They don't need explaining what happened. Soldier's instinct works faster than regulations. Threat eliminated. A strange sound hangs over the swamp. It is not the movie-style, orderly "Ura!" shown in newsreels. It is a wild, animal howl. A howl of liberation. A howl of people given back the right to live. "Forward!" someone screams on the road. "Forward, you bastards!" Hundreds of grey figures rise from the mud. They are dirty, wet, angry. Their overcoats weigh a ton from water. Their boots slip. But they run. They run not because orders command it, but because they need to vent accumulated terror in movement. They need to run to that bonfire and make sure the beast is truly dead. Infantry passes by the Su-76. The small, self-propelled gun stands on the edge of the brush, listing to one side. It looks pitiful. Soot-covered, dirty, with scratched armor. The open compartment is flooded with water. Light smoke still comes from the barrel. Running soldiers turn their heads. They see the crew. Sergeant Major Oklopkov sits on the armor, legs dangling inside. He does not look like a hero. His face is black from soot. Shadows lie under his eyes. Hands lie limply on his knees. On the gun barrel dangles some ridiculous construction of wire and rags, looking like trash. The soldiers don't know about the broken sight. They don't know about the binoculars. They don't know about the math of the blind shot. They see only the result. Cracker, this bare-assed Ferdinand, which the infantry pities and laughs at, just took down the king of beasts. David killed Goliath. One of the runners, an elderly sergeant with a bandaged head, slows his pace near the SPG. He looks at Oklopkov. There is no admiration in his look. There is understanding. Heavy, male understanding of what price such a shot commands. He just nods, silently, and runs on, toward the burning German tank, reloading his PPSH submachine gun on the move. This nod is worth more than any medal. Inside the compartment, withdrawal sets in. The loader slides down the wall to the bottom, right into a puddle. He starts shaking. Now, when mortal danger has passed, the body allows itself to vent stress. Teeth chatter so hard it seems they are about to crumble. He looks at his hands and doesn't recognize them. The driver leans back against the seat backrest. He closes his eyes. He needs just to breathe. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. He listens to the engine cooling, metal ticking. This is the music of life. The gunner carefully touches his ear, blood dried into a crust. Hearing returns slowly. The world sounds like through a pillow. He looks at the gun breech, at the massive piece of steel that was just an extension of his hands. Now it is just cold iron. The magic connection of man and machine disintegrated. Oklopkov takes out a pouch. Fingers disobey. Tobacco spills past the rolling paper onto wet pants. He curses, but there is no anger. There is emptiness. He looks at the binoculars. The wire that bit into the barrel paint now hangs loosely. Rags that served as gaskets burned from the barrel temperature during the shot. German optics are covered with a layer of soot. The sergeant major takes out a knife, ordinary penknife. The blade clicks. He cuts the wire. Ping! The steel core snaps and falls to the floor. Oklopkov takes the binoculars in his hands. It is heavy, cold. Glasses are intact, but the focus mechanism is jammed from impact. Trophy ruined. Did the job, he says quietly to the thing. Thanks, German. You served well. He doesn't throw it away. He carefully wipes the soot with a rag and puts it back in the duffel bag. Maybe they'll fix it in the repair battalion. Or maybe it will remain as a souvenir. A memory of the day when he looked death in the face through German lenses. The river of war continues to flow past the self-propelled gun. Infantry, trucks, carts. People pass the burnt Ferdinand warily, even knowing it is dead. The huge hulk of the enemy still radiates threat. Heat from the burning skeleton is felt 50 meters away. No one stops to shake hands with the Su-76 crew. No one throws flowers on the armor. And that is right. This is not a parade. This is a conveyor belt. The crew did their job, cleared the jam. Now they are just another unit of equipment standing on the roadside waiting for orders. Heroism in war is not a flash and not a pose on a pedestal. Heroism is a result. Oklopkov looks at the passing column. He sees soldiers' faces, gray, tired, unshaven. Someone has a bandaged head. Someone limps leaning on a rifle. They are going west. They are alive. That is the real reward. Not the Order of the Red Star, which might be given, or might not. Clerks in headquarters often lose award citations. And not the title of hero. The reward is the field post that will start working in this battalion this evening. Hundreds of triangles folded from notebook sheets. Hello, Mum. I am alive. Beloved, we are moving forward. Dad, we are beating Fritz. If Oklopkov had missed, these letters wouldn't exist. There would only be official notifications. Missing in action, or fell the death of the brave. All the mathematics of his shot, all this crazy engineering with wire and binoculars comes down to one simple formula. The weight of lead that did not hit his comrades equals the weight of ink in letters home. This is the only arithmetic that matters. Driver, Oklopkov hides the rag in his pocket. Check the oil and tighten tracks. The left one seems to have drifted on the turn. Yes, check oil, responds the driver. He already climbed out of the hatch and is clanking wrenches. Life returns to the familiar rut. Routine absorbs the feat. Need to refuel. Need to load a new ammo supply. Only 11 shells left. Need to find where to eat.
The stomach, silent during the battle, now twists with hunger cramps.
That is good. Hunger is a sign of life. The dead don't want to eat. A messenger from the battalion commander approaches the SPG. A young lieutenant, overcoat in clay, map case on his side. Sergeant Major Oklopkov? Here. Order to move out. You move in the rear of the second column. Task is same, fire support. How is the sight? Sight. Oklopkov pauses for a second. Operational. We work by the barrel. The lieutenant nods understandingly. He doesn't ask for details. To him, the report is important. Combat ready. Good. Move out in 10 minutes. The lieutenant leaves. Oklopkov looks over his machine. Su-76. Columbine. An iron box with a truck engine. It looks terrible. Paint burned, fenders bent, swamp inside. But it is alive. It breathes heat from the cooling engine. It didn't let them down. He slaps the cold armor of the casemate with his palm. Gently, like a horse's withers.
It's okay, he says quietly.
We'll fight some more. There is no place for pathos here. No place for beautiful speeches about the motherland and Stalin. Political officers will say these words at rallies in the rear. Here, on the front line, words weigh too little. Here, deeds speak. They survived a duel with a monster. They saved the infantry. They are ready to go further. Rain begins to subside. Clouds in the west, where the road goes, part a little, revealing a strip of pale, cold sky. The sunset will be red. Predicting wind, the sergeant major takes out his pouch, rolls a new cigarette. This time tobacco doesn't spill. Hands are steady. He lights up from a trophy lighter, inhales deeply the acrid smoke of coarse tobacco. Smoke fills lungs, makes the head spin a little. He looks at his hands. Dirt is still visible on them, eaten into skin forever, which no rag can take. This is the dirt of war.
It will stay with him until the end of days, even if he returns to his clean Yakut taiga.
But that will be later, and right now there is only this moment. Silence after battle, taste of tobacco, and the realization of a simple fact. Alive. And that's fine. That is enough.